Hi there, my name is Sean, and I've got 10 random tips to help you with Gamemaker. This particularly pertains to Gamemaker 8, but I'm sure it applies to any of the older and newer versions. So without any further ado, here we go. Alright, for tip number 10, this one's pretty important. You're going to want to give all of your resources prefixes. This is as simple as naming your sprites SPR sprite name or even your sounds SND sound. You can vary this to some extent. Not only does this quickly ensure you'll have no resource conflicts, it'll teach you good technique for the future. Big name game companies use this technique, so if you plan on moving forward in the industry, this will teach you how to manage your resources from the get-go. Tip number 9, load your sounds externally. Create a folder, name it sounds, data, SFX, whatever you want, and use it to hold your sound files. You can then load them in with sound replace or sound create either on the fly or at your game's title screen, loading screen, whatever. As easy as it is to just bundle everything up into Gamemaker, there are instances where you're better off loading your resources from an external folder. Your sound data is one of those instances. One of the reasons Gamemaker is great to develop with is because it's lightweight and you can execute and test your games quickly. When you add large sound files to your game, it'll be slowed down, your boot times will drag, and that'll just really put a damper on your debugging and testing process, and that's never good. Tip number 8, solid objects should not move. I haven't actually programmed the Gamemaker engine, so I can't give you the reason for this, but there's a general consensus in the community that if you have solid objects moving in your game, it'll be slowed down quite a bit. So as a rule of thumb, just don't do it. Tip number 7, use parent objects. This is really helpful for objects that the player will collide with, for instance, walls and floors. It's also commonly used for dangerous objects or objects that damage the player. It's difficult to have one object for all the solid surfaces in your game, so when you make different solid objects, assign them all a common parent. This way, when you're doing collision tests, you can check for the presence of simply the parent object, and it will detect any and all collidable objects in that area. The parent-child system in Gamemaker is by far one of the most powerful aspects of Gamemaker. It'll save you a lot of time and effort when properly used. If you want to go the extra mile, draw a parent tree. This way you can map out all the objects in your game and which parents they fall under. Tip number 6, write your own collision and movement scripts. This may seem like you're reinventing the wheel, but it's actually really important for flexibility. You should avoid using Gamemaker's default variables like h-speed, v-speed, and direction. These variables force your object into a movement system that you have very little control over. You can get by with using the basic movement collision system to an extent, but I think everyone will end up ditching it for one reason or another. You'll learn more and have more control over your game if you just write these systems yourself. This is one of those things that separates the novice Gamemaker user from someone who takes it a little more seriously. Tip number 5, use temporary variables. These are variables that are prefaced by the keyword var. They only persist in memory until the code block is done executing, which means they don't eat up memory very long. Gamemaker's laid-back approach to variable and type definition may fool you into believing that you can be sloppy with variable use, but in using temporary variables, you'll save yourself some memory allocation in the long run, and it's generally a good practice to destroy variables you don't need after you're done using them. Tip number 4, avoid the path system. Some people may not agree with this, but I don't see it as very useful, and even if it is, it hides a lot of the stuff that's going on behind the scenes from you, which gives you less control over it as a whole. If you're going to do a path system, you might as well write your own. It's not difficult, and you can use arrays to store the positions and move your objects that way. Tip number 3, you're going to want to floor all of your objects when you draw them. Basically, the floor function in Gamemaker eliminates the decimal from the variable. And when you floor your x and your y, you're telling Gamemaker to draw the object exactly as it is without blurring at that position. Otherwise, if the position has a decimal in it, Gamemaker will try to compensate and draw the object at a decimal position by blurring the sides of the object or the sprite. This makes the game appear sloppy, and it doesn't play well with movement. So in general, you're just going to want to have nice round numbers when you draw a sprite. Tip number 2, use tiles wherever you can. I know everyone says this, but it's true. It'll save you a lot of processing power because objects inherently use a lot of memory just with their inherent variables. The tile system is a little finicky in GameMaker, especially with the room editor, at least GameMaker 8. So if you need to create your own level editor, it's not that difficult, and the benefit you get from using tiles will be well worth it. Tip number 1, properly comment your dang code. This is the most important tip on this video. It'll help you all throughout your programming career. The thing is, when you go to visit your code 6 months down the line and you're taking a second look at it, you haven't seen it in a while, you're not going to know what you're looking at unless there are comments. Now, there's a difference between good commenting and bad commenting. I'm not really going to go into it, but if you have an excess of comments, it's also detrimental to your programming process. So you want to make sure that you're only saying what needs to be said. That's all I got, folks. I hope you enjoy these tips, and I hope you use them well. I will put links in the description to articles that are useful pertaining to these tips. And please let me know what you think in the comments below.